Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Batman Returns from 1992. And this is a winner of the Patreon movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month. And this movie was selected by Austin. I think I said in the last time, first Batman movie won the movie review vote, that I wasn't allowed to see Batman when it came out. I wasn't allowed to see this either, but I do remember culturally what it was like. I did see it a little after, but culturally it felt like it was everywhere right before it came out. It felt a little similar to the original. It came out on June 19th in America. That's sort of close to my recollection of when schools used to get out then. I don't know the exact date of when I got out of second grade, but I remember kids already had the Batman Returns shirts. I remember people had, inflatable things. Also, like, people were ready. People had beach towels. But I knew it was out. It was culturally everywhere. And it just felt like by July 4th, no one was wearing their shirts. The beach towels, even though it was summer, weren't coming out as much. It sort of felt like all the air was let out. And I heard kids say they didn't like it as much. It was creepier. It was too grown up. I didn't see the infamous talk show thing that goes around the internet and you can watch on YouTube. Maybe that was on late night shows and stuff, but that wasn't really the vibe then. That wasn't what went on. So I never heard about that until later, or the McDonald's thing. I just knew culturally people were not as into this as the first one. And you just tell that by the merchandise. Like, there were posters of Jack Nicholson everywhere. There were posters of Batman everywhere. And this, it just felt like there was posters of everyone everywhere before it came out. A little bit after, but it just felt like nobody wanted that shit after a certain point. And then it kind of rebounded. Then I remember, I went to a lot of comic book stores in the 90s. Suddenly people said, this is the better movie because it's darker and weirder and different and strange and interesting. And I remember feeling that way. Then I have not seen this movie as many times as the 89 Batman. The sequels for me are not as big of a thing. But watching it this time, I think this is a really interesting movie. Like, very interesting. It's probably the first Tim Burton movie that had a hugely bloated budget. It makes no fucking sense. It has enough compelling parts that you feel like you saw something interesting, but you kind of know you didn't. And because it's not, like, if this came out in 2000, it would make more sense. But because it came out during Tim Burton's kind of early peak cultural period, you kind of, there's elements of it that raise up. But this movie really doesn't work. I think of the two villain Batman movies, which I don't understand why they did that, because it's such a distinction, both culturally and in terms of quality, between the Batman movie that has one villain and all the other ones that have two villains. Why they kept doing that, I don't know. I don't know if it sold that much more merch. They didn't. None of them sold as much merch as the original, so I don't know. Maybe they did. Maybe I'm wrong. But I think this is the most interesting of all those. It never made sense that all these villains would team up as much as they did. It's always awkward when they have that scene where what if we team up? And this didn't really happen that much in the comics. It was pretty rare. And then why we went back to it so much. But this is probably the one you want to go through and find the interesting parts in more so than the others. The others are oh, that was big that summer. This doesn't feel like 1992. It doesn't feel like, Nirvana's breaking out and November Rain, the music videos everywhere. It does because it was there, but it doesn't get the vibe. It's like Tim Burton's own thing, which is kind of what happened. The studio wanted to get Tim Burton back, and they said, you can make a Tim Burton Batman, you have full creative control, except the Penguin has to be in it, and he wanted Catwoman, and that's how we got this, basically. Which is weird, because you'd think Tim Burton wanted Penguin or something. It was his interpretation of Penguin. They're you have to have Penguin, because I think they thought he was comparable to Joker. I don't understand why they didn't go with the Riddler or Two-Face. Especially with the plot of this, doesn't make really a lot of sense. But the plot of this movie is basically that the Penguin, who was abandoned as a child by Pee-wee and the lady who asked about the Alamo. He lived in the sewer, has the Red Triangle gang somehow from the sewer, has an army of penguins, and he decides to look up and he was going to attack Gotham City. Then Max Schreck, which, by the way, okay, so this might be a weird Jim thing here, but there's a guy in Batman Returns, played by Christopher Walken, called Max Schreck. And I kept thinking, this is a meme that's happened. Like, people have talked about how Shrek is in a Batman movie, voiced by Christopher Walken. And yet when I looked, no one's commented on this. Like, I understand it's Shrek with a C and a K, and not just a K. But, like, you're telling me there's a universe where Batman fought Shrek, and he was played by Christopher Walken, and we're just all walking around like this world is normal, like this thing hasn't been going. Like, what is this, guys? I don't understand. I mean, he doesn't act like Shrek, but somebody once told me that he did, and it's weird. Like, I don't know how that's never been. Why is that not brought up more? That's so weird. Anyway, I think they refer to him as Shrek. I mean, that is his name, but still, it's just like Shrek. And he's going to make Penguin the mayor, basically, so he can do this dumb power plant thing, which they drop a lot of plot points in this. Penguin's going to find out who his parents are, which he sort of knows, but then he's trying to collect all the firstborn names, which that plotline literally goes nowhere. But in the one shining spot of this whole movie, Max Schreck pushes his personal executive assistant, I believe she likes to be called, out of a window, who then becomes Selena Kyle, who then is rescued by Alley Katz and becomes Catwoman, and Batman is somewhere in here as well. The Batman of this was really struck me because I watched this on streaming. I think previously I'd watched it on like DVD or VHS or something. And this time I very much noticed that Batman doesn't even show up till 12 minutes in. Barely says anything. Does cool Batman stuff, sure. But doesn't even show up till 12 minutes in because you gotta set up Catwoman, you gotta set up Penguin. Then you have that issue. Then he doesn't really significantly say anything until 30 minutes in. He is like the titular returning person, and where the fuck is he? Like, I know that's been a criticism Keaton has said about this film, that it was way more about the villains, and 100%. Like, I don't know why it was so... This is such a different film from the first one. It is incredibly jarring, which I get, like, Tim Burton, maybe that was him compromising, and he basically sort of never did that to that degree ever again in his entire life. It feels like never again. And I do like the idea of a messy Tim Burton film post Edward Scissorhands while he's in production on Nightmare Before Christmas. Like that's fascinating, and a lot of the sets and how he chose to shoot stuff and go into stuff is really interesting. But it's like, this is not a Batman movie. It's like a Penguin, Catwoman. Like, that's one of the things. Like, this movie doesn't know what it is, and it hurts the movie so much. Like, this is not about, like, the first one was like, let's do a dark, different kind of Batman movie. Sure, why not? Great, everybody loved it. Batman Returns is like, well, it's like a political allegory thing, and also Catwoman's in it, and like, I wish it had just been about Catwoman. The Penguin plotline doesn't really work, and like the firstborn thing, that really bugged me as a kid. I remember a comics adaptation where they went further with it. And in the movie, they don't. And I don't know if that really happened. I didn't look. As a kid, when I saw it in elementary school, it freaked me out. And now that I'm older, what I don't get about that whole plotline is it comes up like a lot, and it goes like nowhere. There's like no point in even having it. Like, you're not even bringing up anything because Batman stops it, and then it's over, and then it's like, oh yeah, I guess he stopped that thing. I guess we're not doing that. And you're like, what? Why did you set up like him researching it, him showing the guy, killing the guy, making a point of it? Like, this is how he's gone too far, and this was a plan all along and stuff. But it's like he didn't do it, and like, I don't know what they're trying to say with the Penguin. Like, Catwoman, it sort of makes a little more sense, and Michelle Pfeiffer is amazing. Like, that's a real movie star turn. Like, the entire time when Michelle Pfeiffer isn't on screen, you're thinking, where's Michelle Pfeiffer? When is she coming back? Danny DeVito is a great actor. I think he's great as Penguin. It's just that script just doesn't fully know what to do with that character. Doesn't understand the character. Doesn't understand the point they're making. Like, I think that the problem is it's such an off-putting, weird thing. Like, no one understood what the point of that was, and like what he's trying to do versus Batman and stuff. And it just comes off as like this evil goblin type creature, and it's not Penguin from the comics. It's its own weird thing, and I don't understand why Warner's wanted Penguin so much. It's such a weird choice. Like, Two-Face, in terms of the mayor stuff, makes more sense. Riddler makes more sense. It's just like there are other villains that are big deals that they could have picked, and it's like, or just been simpler. Like, just this does feel like Warner's and Tim Burton and all of them sort of got in their own way, and I don't really understand whose fault this is. It's just faults all around. I do think Tim Burton is just showing off technically what he can do or visually what he can do and stuff. A lot of people say this is a Christmas movie. Yeah, it takes place during Christmas. I've never understood why it came out in the summer. I think it would have made more sense. I don't know what 1992's Christmas season was like now. I think it had Home Alone 2. It just doesn't make sense why they put it out in the summer other than the first one did, or why make a Christmas movie for the summer. I don't understand. I think this is an interesting film, and I think it's a film that you can find meaning in, because I hear so many people oh, well, his original intention was this, and you can kind of see this and all that stuff. It's yeah, but there's nothing to actually sink your teeth into. It's not I think this is sandwiched between two really great classic Batman films, the 1989 one and Mask of the Phantasm, and both those know the point they're making about Batman and kind of going into the psychology of it. And this is Batman is an afterthought. I did like that bat signal thing, first bat signal thing in the, I think it's is that the first one, 12 minutes in, maybe? That was amazing. The way Tim Burton set that up, that was really cool. But it's what are they saying, him versus Penguin? Whereas what they're saying about him versus Joker? I wish they'd gotten more into that. And it just felt like they're trying to be oh, well, Christopher Walken's a real bad guy because he wears a suit, which I know Dana Waters, who wrote the screenplay, who had also written the screenplay to Heathers and Demolition Man, and Hudson Hawk. So he wanted to say that, and I think it sort of works, but there's so many characters. I know they were going to have Robin, played by Marlon Wayans, at some point. He was going to fix Batman's car after it's messed up. I don't know how that would have fit in here. It just felt like they were just trying to do as much as they could. In one of these, this feels like a convoluted sort of Batman movie. There were certain things like the Vicky Vale reference was apparently, a lot of people mentioned, was a big deal at the time. I think it sort of stinks that we don't really get a full sequel. I find it really interesting that they were let's do this different sequel instead of a traditional Batman 2. But since this wasn't actually good, it's not a good movie. That's the thing with this. It's not good. It kind of exists in its own thing to an obnoxious degree. It doesn't really know what it's saying. And I kind of almost want to see a real sequel rather than this, because after I've sat through so many of these two villain movies, even if this is maybe the best of the sequels, none of which I really like, I sort of don't care. It's it also had less pop music. It has the one Susie Sue song. I think rewatching it just kind of solidified for me. It's I like certain moments. I remember having the stickers. I remember my elementary school girlfriend really liked Catwoman. And I remember a lot of girls really like Catwoman. I wish Catwoman was more of the focus of it, to be honest, because that's the most memorable part. Michelle Pfeiffer is amazing in it. She gets the most kind of an arc. Chris Rocken is fine. He's sort of doing his own thing. He very much gets how campy this is. Danny DeVito is great. I mean, most of the people are good in it. I think Keaton comes off as being more a movie star who's barely in it. He sort of looks a little bored because he's not the focus, but he's Batman, which is, I think, strange, because I don't think he fully knew what to do with this kind of movie, and I don't think Burton had much direction beyond his own auteur bullshit. And it's auteur bullshit's cool, man, and I think it worked out for him. Most of his 90s are stuff I like, and then there's this, it's I like Edward Scissorhands, I like Nightmare Before Christmas, it's Ed Wood. They're all Mars Attacks, all great, and you manage just to have a real point and say something interesting and play in your dreams and stuff. And then you watch Batman Returns, you're what the fuck? And I get that Penguin and Shrek are supposed to be saying something about Reagan, and that's interesting. And there's certain things they reference about Nazi Germany and stuff in there. That's clearly there are ideas in here, and you debated things, and you wanted politically for us to land, but it just doesn't. And it's it would have made more sense if it was Harvey Dent. It just becomes so outlandish with the Penguin. I don't think that fully works, so many plot lines when you got to the point, the first kid thing, he's going to take all the firstborn sons. They're just going to go into those houses, these are rich people, they're not babysitters, it strongly insinuated like put their kids to bed and laugh. It's like no one does that, even in the 90s. I was like, it's especially rich people. I just no. It was strange. The power plant thing, which is like instrumental into the mayor, why he kills Selena Kyle. Like they even like what goes on with like that thing sort of goes nowhere. Just like you can say like, oh, and in the end this person died by electricity. We didn't have that have all this meaning, but it's like it didn't really, because none of it like landed. You're just like trapped in this stylistic like cornucopia opera of Tim Burton, and like yeah, it's better than just because it's practical effects and it's way more better to look at than like fucking Alice in Wonderland. But I just don't care, and that's the problem with it. Like I'm not as attached to it. Like Batman was a messy movie, and I think a lot of these special effects films like Batman and Ghostbusters of this era were films that like barely came together by like scotch tape and like half-eaten glue and stuff, and then suddenly they have to make a sequel and corporatize it and like double the budget and all this stuff, or corporatize it more. They're both corporate movies, obviously, and like neither of these films work as well, and it's kind of like a kind of lightning in the bottle amount of like, you know, film school ingenuity that got it to work in the first place, and they kind of like lose that by trying to like, you know, making sure the Pepsi cup looks right and making sure, you know, they have toys and all these things, and it totally fell apart. The main thing I remember about this is in the fall of this, I'm not going to look this up, and I'm like fairly confident, Batman the Animated Series came out, and it felt like, you know, oh, this is the tie-in or something, and slowly I realized it wasn't. I just got this amazing I got this amazing animated series to watch every day when I came home from school. That's what I remember most about this movie, is something completely different in another medium. So I just, you know, even when thinking about it, I was like, oh yeah, I saw it this. I can't remember how many times I've seen it, because it doesn't land with me. And I don't think it lands with most people other than Catwoman and the certain performances and things. But like, I think a lot of what worked about the first one is, you know, that they kept it kind of simple and figured out what worked, but also they had strong performances. I think those performances understood what they were doing. And like, you have a strong performance from Michelle Pfeiffer, but DeVito's just all out in all sorts of strange places. And it's just like Tim Burton, the studio let him go. And I think it's interesting what you got, but it's just like, it's not him as a storyteller. It's him as a stylist auteur and like not thinking about anything else. And that's like not what you want in a Batman film, which I think is also the problem with Schumacher. It's what happened to Schumacher too. It's like he starts off more restrained and then he goes all out. That's not what you want in a Batman. You want a good story. Like that's why he's such a good character. It's like he's a detective, he goes on a good story and he solves it, and you're like, oh cool, that was really fascinating. And if you don't have a good story and good meaning, this character and his story, it just becomes like kind of just dressing and nothing else. It's like just a bunch of ranch dressing on a salad plate, and you're gonna tell me that's a meal. I don't think it's necessarily too dark. It is pretty dark and grim and cynical, but that's not the issue. The issue is like, its cynicism is of the world, but I don't think it really fully has gone into why it's cynical, other than the normies are so dumb. I'm so over it, roll my eyes. I think Batman Returns could have been something interesting, could have been something neat, but I don't know if it's the studio, I don't know if it's Tim Burton. All I know is I'm not necessarily that interested, but hey, who cares, because Batman is forever, and there'll always be another one around the corner. The Batman movie that's the most interesting, rather than actually being good. So if you've seen Batman Returns and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. And if you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month. Thank you very much for watching.